Hello everyone. On the 19th of May 2001, the first Apple store opened in Tyson's Corner in Virginia. It wasn't like any other computer store. Instead, it was a huge open space focused not on the products, but on the experiences that you could use those products for, such as movie making or listening to music. And it was developed almost exclusively under the opinions of Steve Jobs and his new head of retail, Ron Johnson. Their vision resulted in a completely different type of store, bringing in $1.2 billion of revenue in the first 3 years. In 2011, Ron Johnson left Apple to take over the American retailer JCPenney. And if you're not familiar with them, think of them a bit like Debenhams or John Lewis. And Ron took a similarly bold approach with those stores that he had done at Apple, taking away the sales and the discounts and installing boutiques. And the result? Well, sales dropped by over 25% and they lost nearly $800 million. 13 months later, Ron was gone. When asked why none of the changes had been tested with its customers, Johnson replied, "Well, we didn't test at Apple." So sometimes intuition can be a powerful thing, where our years of experience crystallize into a simple decision, unfettered by endless discussions and spreadsheets. But intuition also has a very big weakness. It can be heavily influenced by bias. And sometimes these biases get in the way of doing what's best for the business. In the case of the Apple Store, Ron Johnson's bias towards grandeur and spectacle worked, because despite the costs involved, his vision raised the perceived value of Apple on the high street, as well as in the minds of its customers. But in the case of JCPenney, his bias towards grandeur failed because he ignored the voices telling him that JCPenney's customers don't want grandeur, they don't want boutiques, they want good, cheap products. And these unconscious biases can influence your decisions when it comes to your L&D initiatives as well. A very common area where our biases might be the most prevalent is when we're looking and considering what training or learning needs we might have in our organization. And typically you might find that you're prioritizing and deciding where your training is coming from the squeaky manager who's always telling you something that they really care about, but it's not grounded in reality or has any evidence behind it. Or our annual surveys where we ask our teams to rate themselves of their skills. Now they're often skewed because people don't want to be too vulnerable for fear of impacting their career progression. And of course, we're all driven by our own desires and ambitions as well. What looks cool to work on, what trends might be chasing, and what might help us get a promotion as well. So before we look at how do we reduce those biases, we want to have a look at what gaps we might have in the organization in the first place, and how do you know if you have any gaps? Well, the simple answer is, I'm sure you'll all agree, every organization has lots of training gaps, and the most common one is the knowing-doing gap. And that's where you've got good results on the learning management system, you're getting great feedback in your training sessions, and you're getting good engagement with all of your content. But when we start to look at things like customer surveys and metrics and KPIs and our own experience, the results say otherwise. The teams know what they should be doing, but they're not being done in practice. That's the knowing-doing gap. So how do we know how do we get a real view of the reality of what's going on at the front line? And it's very simple. It's through the power of observation. And these are real simple ways where a team leader will observe one of their team and map that against a checklist of the ideal journeys you want them to go on when they're doing a certain task. You collate the results and then you look at the shortcomings. And the great thing about observations is you can coach in the moment. So after the team leader has observed a behavior, they can coach improvements, they can recognize the successful areas, and they can make sure they take any corrective actions. And of course, you take all of these observations, you collate them, and you analyze the information. And what are you left with? You've got the training needs at the front line as opposed to the guesses in head office. Trying to click two buttons at once, my apologies. This is an ongoing process, not just an annual check, so you get fresh insights every month. And the answers are there, you just have to go and look for them. And a great time to find these training gaps is when somebody new joins the organization. With attrition at an all-time high, it's really vital to ensure that your new starters have everything they need to succeed, which will help both them and the organization. And what behaviors might you want to see in the first 90 days? And you can look at, do they have good product knowledge? What's their attitude like? Do we need to be doing more to motivate and excite them as they join the business? And can they do key tasks? And where are they struggling? It might be that you've launched a new process or a new system and you want to observe what steps are slowing people down, where people are struggling, and again, what's working and what isn't, and use that to shape your training going forward. And then you might have a store manager who can observe how their staff interact with their customers, checking, are they being welcoming, are they managing the queue, are they getting to know the customer and meet the needs, and of course, do they ask for the sale as well. I'll share a quick story about how Victoria's Secret do their in-store observations in a moment, but first a quick introduction. My name is Ben Collier, I'm one of the co-founders at Acasta, and we work with learning and development teams to highlight the training and the learning needs at their frontline, all through observation using our app, Acasta Review. So for Victoria's Secrets, everything is all about the customer experience for them. They want to understand the lifestyle of their customers coming into store so they can recommend the right products for them. And their store managers or customer service leads will actually watch one of their associates interact with a customer and again track that against their ideal sales journey. So they'll ask if the customer is shopping for a special occasion, and they'll then use that to recommend the right products through examples. They can also offer additional products like fragrances and bring that back to the occasion. So if someone says they're shopping for their wedding anniversary weekend away at the beach, they might recommend just the right fragrance to wear for that experience. And lastly, for Victoria's Secret, one of the big questions is, are their associates offering bra fittings? Because 80% of people that have a bra fitting go on to buy the bra because they feel confident and comfortable in it. So that's a great opportunity for them to maximize everybody that comes into store. Once these observations are complete, the manager will deliver a feedback session to the store associate through coaching. They'll work together, build out a mutual action plan of the areas they want to focus on, and celebrate the strengths of the associate as well. And with each associate being observed at least once a month, they always have a clear view of where their training gaps are, and they use this to create a monthly skill builder, which is a resource of all the key areas that they want to focus on. Now, of course, when you're thinking of your own observations, you have to come and pick the right questions to put into those. So you're obviously still at risk of being biased in what you put into these, so it's important to look at things like, what does good look like? What would you like to see on your ideal journeys that the customers are taken on? What behaviours do you cover in your training, and what would they look like in the real world? As well as being able to refine that over time. And it's a great opportunity to debunk or prove some of the biases that might be in the organisation. If you've got that regional manager that's always saying you don't offer enough bra fittings, you can include that question into your observations, and you'll later then be able to either prove them right or maybe prove them wrong. And what do these look like in practice? Well, there's multiple ways that you can do it. You can get your managers and team leaders to do it on pen and paper, and that's how Victoria's Secret started. You can use Excel, you can use SurveyMonkey, and of course, when you're ready, you can use an observation app like Acasta Review to guide your managers through the observations and get a live feed of information appearing. Here's a quick quote from Steph Howe, who's one of the store trainers at Victoria's Secret. I won't read it to you now, but I think it's just an important reminder that by having the evidence of the behaviours at the front line is a great opportunity to adjust your existing training, but also to get some buy-in for future and new training initiatives in the future as well. Next month, we'll be releasing a guide on how to launch observations and highlight the training needs in your organisation. So if you would like to get a copy of that when it's ready, please do scan the QR code and we'll email it to you. And we'll also get you a copy of how Victoria's Secret made measurable learning, a white paper that we put together there as well. We'd like to include some real world stories in there. So if anyone has any training needs, analysis or observation tips or tricks and they'd like to be featured, please speak to me later today. Thank you.